Good evening, and welcome to Wellness Watch here on blackdoctor.org, the African American Wellness Project, as well as Dr. Michael Lenore's personal page. We all are happy to have him as part of this program. Um, if you are watching us right now, you're probably wondering, wait a minute, it's 7:30. It's not 9 o'clock. Well, guess what? We have a new time here for you. We felt like we got your feedback and we learned that 9 o'clock was a bit too late, especially here on the East Coast where I live. It's a bit too late for you to join us. And so we said, we're going to listen to the people. And the people said, we needed an earlier show because we enjoy your program so much, but we need for it to be earlier. So here we are. It is 7:30, our new time, 7:30 Eastern time, 4:30 on for our West Coast brethren. So again, as we always do, let us know where you're watching from. Put that down in the comment section. Let us know where you're watching from. And we'd always like to see our people from all over the nation joining us. Also, if you have questions about tonight's topic or for tonight's guest, make sure that you drop that also in the comment section. This is a show that's interactive, and we want to make sure that we are listening to what and answering the questions that you have about medical topics so you can be your own best health advocate. Speaking of which, that's a little bit of tease, because if you watch throughout tonight's program and at the end of the program, we've got a special gift for those people that put what they learned the most important thing that they've learned today during tonight's program. And we've got a special gift for those, for one lucky fan to receive each week from this program. So that's a lot of instruction I gave you, so I'm going to give you a brief recap. Make sure you tell us where you're watching from. Hey, Jennifer, I'll see you again. You might get a Superfan award there. So again, tell us where you're watching from. Put your questions in the comment section. And at the end of the program, make sure you tell us what you learned the most so you can qualify for a special gift that we're going to give away each week. And also remember, this is our new time. So I think I have filibustered enough, even though Congress is trying to get rid of the filibuster. I have worked it to perfection, and I'm going to bring on the man of the hour, of the day, of the week, of the month, of the year, of the decade, and of the century. I think I've got it all. His name is Dr. Michael Lenore. Welcome, Dr. Lenore.
I'm wondering if I was still on the program for a minute. Maybe I had the wrong option.
But I told you it was a filibuster. It was a filibuster.
I got you. I want to welcome people to the Wellness Watch. I will be here every week at 7:30 Eastern Time and 4:30 Pacific Time. Today's topic is asthma. So if you've got any questions about asthma, we have one of the world's experts who will be joining us, and we have to answer all your questions about asthma, especially its impact in the African American community. While we wait for our guests, let me just tell you a little bit about the African American Wellness Project. We are a project based primarily out of Oakland, California, but we have people all over the country. We're a health education project. We're a project that's designed to help and to instruct African Americans how to get the best out of the healthcare system. There's not one of you listening out there now who has not been either disrespected, ignored, or betrayed by the healthcare system as it currently exists in this country. And so what we are trying to do with giving you the education you need, bringing you the experts, and asking you to ask your questions, we're trying to help you build your own healthcare system so that you can overcome some of the barriers that African Americans, women, and other ethnic minorities take on. And asthma is a good one for us to start our new project with, because so many African Americans have asthma. 53 million people have asthma. African Americans 3 times more likely to die from asthma. African American women with the highest mortality rates in the country from asthma. So if you've got this is a program that is no better than your willingness to call and ask us questions and try to get some of your concerns answered. And so every week we'll be here to do that. So before we start about that, it's always a good thing to talk with Mr. Dean about COVID. Now, you may not know this, but Mr. Dean has done so many of these programs. He's become the world's expert on the COVID virus. There's no element of COVIDity, I just made that word up, the COVIDity that he has not been able to discuss. And I think that's a good thing for us and a good thing for our program. This week, it's all about the Delta virus, the variant of the COVID-19 virus, especially deadly, especially infectious, and it's certainly spreading like wildfire across the world, and not only certainly in this country. It's a much bigger threat for vaccinated people, and that's really all I have to say about it right now, because we've talked with everybody about
It's a
getting
bigger
back.
threat for unvaccinated people. Let's make sure that get that distinction.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It's a danger for unvaccinated people.
Unvaccinated people.
Thank you for that correction.
Yeah.
And so we've asked people to seriously consider vaccination. No lectures coming from here. We're not going to lecture you, but we want you to keep an open mind. If you need more information, go to our website at aawellnessproject.org, or go to get some information from the CDC. And don't get caught up in all these attacks on Dr. Fauci. Now, Dr. Fauci was a savior for all these people, and here they come now trying to jam him on the fact that he's destroying their civil liberties. What most people don't realize that most of these Republicans, I don't want to be partial, but most of his critics have gotten vaccinated.
Yes.
They just won't tell you that they've gotten vaccinated.
Yes.
And so consequently, but I don't think that any of us, whether you are vaccinated or not, can come down on Dr. Fauci like that. What do you think, Ellis?
I liken it to what happened at the very beginning of the pandemic, and remember how there were people that were downplaying its importance and saying how it wasn't that big of a deal. Don't worry, keep going. And while they were telling you that, they were also selling stocks and changing things in their portfolio because they were preparing, because they knew the significance of it. And that's what we're seeing now outside of partisan politics. I'm not even going to mention any party, but I'm going to say this, that make sure you know the vaccination status of the people that are telling you or that are speaking out against, especially leaders, elected leaders that are speaking out against the vaccine, many of whom were first in line, were a part of that first list that got vaccinated early on in the process, and now they're out there speaking against because it gives them political favor. For their constituents. And so we do have to be very, very cognizant of the context of what's happening. So I've seen a few, kind of extreme videos, but I've seen some videos where people were giving the previous administration credit for getting the vaccine developed, but then still said in the next breath, they're not taking it. So it's very interesting. So I would say, go to the African American Wellness Project website to get more information. At blackdoctor.org, we have a COVID resource center that you can go and check out, and it has questions, it has answers and articles and videos and everything you need to know or want to know about the vaccines. And so I would say this, and last thing I'm going to say, and then I'm going to turn it back over to you, Dr. Lenore, is if you're going to do research, don't just do research about the vaccines. Do research about what it means to catch COVID and what the life that you may or may not have after catching COVID, even if you survive. And so there's some significant things that you'll have to do going forward, including listing COVID as a pre-existing condition on your medical records and on your insurance records. And you might also have long haulers disease. And so I would say check that out. And they're still studying the long-term effects of people having had and lived through COVID. So just, because you will survive, it's not like the flu, where the flu kind of goes away when you recover. COVID tends to have a longer effect. So that's what I feel.
As we end this conversation on COVID, let's just share one man, actor Delroy Lindo's experience with the virus.
I understand the hesitancy and the resistance that some folk may have to taking the COVID-19 vaccine. And you absolutely have a right to feel hesitant. But COVID is real, and I know from firsthand experience. I had it. I wouldn't wish COVID on anyone. I've fully recovered, but I don't want to ever be that sick again. You and all the people that you love are at risk from COVID-19 infection. So please get vaccinated for yourselves, your family, and your community. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I would say that it does a lot of it. So, with that, let's move on to our special guest. And for those of you who don't know the African American Wellness Project, much of what we talk about today will be in our podcast. Our podcast comes out once a week. It's called Black Doctors Speak with 2S. Black Doctors Speak. So, the information you get here, you want to share with your friends and family about asthma, then go to our podcast, Black Doctors Speak. It'll be available probably in a couple of days. And I think we're extremely lucky to have with us Dr. LeRoy Graham. Dr. LeRoy Graham, to those of you who don't know him, is one of the world's experts in the diagnosis and management of asthma, and especially in the African American community. Dr. Graham was we actually were somewhat contemporary. I think I'm usually a little bit before everybody else.
Somebody's got to blaze the trail, though. Somebody's got to blaze the trail.
Trained partially in the service, University of Colorado, I believe, or one of those high-powered hospitals in Colorado, but without question, acknowledged as the world's expert on asthma in the African American community and just asthma in general. So if you've got questions about your asthma, your grandmother's asthma, your children's asthma, this is the show where we take those questions and try to make it most of our content. So you know how to reach us by getting in the chat. Dr. Graham, welcome to our program.
Thank you, Mike, for this opportunity.
Man, that's quite a background you got there, brother. I mean, I got to step it up a little bit. Looking at that background.
You know, we downsized when we semi-retired. This is my cave, man.
Well, I got a bunch of questions for you before our audience gets started. It seems like when I first started in practice, there were 12 million people with asthma. Then it went up to 18. Now it's something like 23, 26. What's happening? Is asthma more common, or is asthma more common, or is it something different?
No, I think both are true. I think asthma is more common. I think some of that is due to enhanced diagnostic efficiency. I think other is due to a lot of things happening in our environment, and I think that we are now recognizing it more. I think it is certainly more increasingly prevalent throughout my career among minorities, particularly in the urban environment. So I think there is a real increase and there's a real appreciation of asthma. I think more people are getting appropriately diagnosed, which you and I know in the old days that was a problem. We got recurrent pneumonia. What the child really had was asthma.
Now, why is the statistics that I mentioned at the beginning of this program? Asthma 3 times more likely to kill a child as African American women with the highest mortality rates. What is that all about? Why?
Well, it's absolutely true, Mike. In both cases, now there may be genetic factors that we don't appreciate, but clearly in the African American population, those statistics are sadly quite true. I think they reflect a lot of things. I think they reflect a little bit better enhanced diagnosis on our part, but also the unique circumstances that I think impact African Americans, both in terms of the incidence of asthma and the severity of that asthma. So I think it is both more prevalent and it is both more morbid or more of a problem among our people.
Now, I think one of the key issues is that for so many people, the term asthma is a confusing term. What actually does asthma mean? Is it all one clinical presentation, one clinical disease?
I'm not sure that it is one clinical disease. I think we would argue that there are phenotypic or style or presentation differences among patients. We know, for instance, that African American females and adults have more prevalent asthma. It's African American males when they're young. We also know that asthma is a little bit more prevalent in the urban environment, maybe due to a lot of provocative environmental factors. But clearly, asthma is at a heightened prevalence among people of color, particularly African American males, pre-pubertally and post-pubertally, maybe more the female. And the other thing I think is even more than the prevalence is a relative severity in our population. We tend to have asthma that for a variety of reasons, either it's management or the intrinsic intensity of the disease, it is more prevalent and sadly more morbid and sadly more lethal.
Now, when we talk about it being, you talk about morbidity. Morbidity to those that are not familiar with all these terms means how sick we are. It's often been said that much of the sickness that we have is because we are not getting the proper information, or it's been linked to genetics. It's been linked to a lot of other things. I've asked the question, already once, but I'm still kind of puzzled as to why this is such a worse problem for African Americans. Is it something we do, or is it something the disease does, or is it something that they do?
I'm not sure it's they. I think it's the environment, and it's also some of the realities, not so much we do, but where we are. For instance, in most urban centers like Chicago, like Atlanta, like maybe Oakland, African Americans tend to populate neighborhoods which are side travel corridors, transportation corridors. Like if you look at Atlanta, where I did most of my practice, there's an 8 and sometimes 16-lane thoroughfare going through the middle of the Black community. So we have a lot of stuff with car pollution and so forth. We also know that in a lot of these areas, in terms of where the energy sources coming from, the coal-fired power plants and so forth, again, more prevalent. We know in rural areas, there's a study out of years ago in Alabama that people next to a refining place where they were processing waste had a high prevalence. So I think there's environmental factors. The other environmental factor that's really uniquely is when we live in stressful situations, when we activate that fight or flight system, that feeds into inflammation. We know, for instance, a work out of Inglewood in Chicago, that asthma was most prevalent in neighborhoods that had a high rate of violent crime. And someone, I put the point that your nervous system, your autonomic nervous system is wired to respond. So we over-respond to a lot of environmental factors. And then finally, we often live in substandard housing where we're exposed to more vermin, we're exposed to more pollution, way back, lead-based paint, a lot of things like that. So there are environmental factors that I think are superimposed on a genetic predisposition that makes us have asthma that is more prevalent and more severe.
Yeah, so for people listening out there, what are the basis? What do you do to make the diagnosis, and what are the principles, the pillars of treatment for the patient who has asthma?
I think the diagnosis is first and foremost a clinical one. We can define it better, confirm it when we do lung function tests, but really it's a clinical diagnosis to get us started. Okay. And the pillars of the therapy is based on the underlying mechanism of disease, and it's chronic inflammation. So we know that the inside lining of the air passages are raw and inflamed, and as such, they're over-responsive to various stimuli. Some may be allergic, but some may be environmental. So a mainstay of someone that has persistent asthma is a maintenance anti-inflammatory agent, for instance, an inhaled corticosteroid. And let me just point out right there, when I have that first discussion with patients, the eyes light up. They talk about all the bad things of steroids and Muscleman and so forth. It's not that steroid. It's a steroid in microgram doses that is given and impacts your airway lining to decrease that reactivity. We also know that we will use bronchodilators that open up the airway on an as-needed basis. Now, as the asthma gets more severe, we have combination medicines where maybe we have a steroid complex with a long-acting bronchodilator. And now lately we found, particularly in African Americans, there's a lot of utility in what we call anticholinergic drugs that can also go with this. But it's a whole thing about getting into a situation where in a practice like yours or practice like mine, an African American or anyone with asthma can be characterized physiologically, a good history can be taken, allergy testing done by whatever means to really define what is triggering that asthma and what is causing inflammation. And then most importantly, or not most importantly, but often ignored, is what do we do to the environment? Where do we take the provocative elements out of that environment? And that's something that's often a challenge financially in terms of substandard housing in the inner cities across the United States.
We've got a question here from the comments, and this is coming from somebody that's in England. And
wow.
she is saying that
you rock the world, man.
He's worldwide. I told y'all at the beginning of the show he's worldwide. But Tasha is saying that she's on the steroid inhalers for the rest of her life, Flutiform and Spiriva. I think that's what she's saying. I often have to have oral steroids. Do you think this is usual long-term treatment?
Well, if indeed that is, I believe that that's what she's taking. By definition, she has moderate to severe asthma. That's what it's taking. She's on an inhaled steroid. She's on a long-acting what we call antimuscarinic, which is another type of long-term dilator. And she often still has to have oral steroids. So I would say she's on a pretty aggressive regimen, yet she's still requiring steroids for when her asthma decompensates. So I would think that, and Mike please weigh in here. Maybe we need to look at the environment. Maybe we need to see if she's sensitized to things. Would immunotherapy help her or something like that? And then sometimes when we talk about the latest and greatest, we have biologic agents that can be taken, say, on a monthly basis to alter her inflammatory response. So I would tell her that I would have a conversation with her doctor. I'm on these medicines that seem to be appropriate. I'm taking them appropriately, and I'm not doing well. And this is a key point. I teach all my patients, particularly African-American patients, you have to be an empowered consumer. You know, if you got a car, a hoopty, and it's not working, you're back in the mechanic or the dealer's space. We have to have that same attitude about our health. We can't settle. With a doctor, it makes a diagnosis, puts you on a medication, tells you what to expect, and it does not occur, and you're taking it, you need to come back and say, hey, this is not working. What's our next step? What's our plan? What are we missing?
You know, it's interesting you said environment, because this was her next comment. When she goes to the Caribbean, I don't even have to take my meds daily, but as soon as I land back in London, I am dependent on it. So I think that is a classic example of what you're speaking to, is there is an environment, something in her environment is inducing or in causing her asthma to act up to where she has to be on that kind of stringent regimen. So she might want to, you know, we can't tell people to move because, you know, that there's a financial component to that. So, you know, we don't want to flex privilege too much.
Have a conversation. She might want to have a conversation with her doctor that, you know, is there something else in the environment that you're not aware of that we can't do something about? Also, when she goes to the Caribbean, she's going to a much more pastoral environment. There's not the same type of heavy industry. There's probably not the same amount of road traffic. So I'm not surprised that in that environment that she does a little bit better. But if we return to that urban environment, we know there are predictable things that can cause that. And here's another important thing, and my colleague, Dr. Lenore, would agree with this. If you had a problem with your car, if you had a problem with your stereo equipment, it wasn't working right, and someone was taking care of it and you weren't satisfied, you'd ask for another opinion. We don't take that same empowered consumerism into our health. So I would tell her that have that discussion and be respectful, but if you don't really get a response, well, hey, can I see it? And I think in London it would be called a respirologist. Can I see a respirologist? Can I see a specialist? Can I see an allergist? And again, that's what we as a people across all parameters of health, we often have lower expectations. We don't have that empowered consumerism that we need to have.
No, I would like to say I agree. We're talking to Dr. LeRoy Graham. We're talking about asthma. I will make the blanket statement to you now that if you're having asthma and you're having a lot of problems, something is wrong. Because with all of the things that we can do diagnostically and all of the things that we can do therapeutically, we should be able to control your asthma. And every death, well, most every death from asthma is unnecessary. Each week, 10 people die from asthma, disproportionately African Americans. So if you're out there with asthma, you're not doing well, you got some questions, this is the time to talk to one of the world's experts. That's what our program's all about.
And not just you.
Well, I didn't want to throw myself in there.
Dr. Norris forgot more about asthma than
I'm somewhere in the game. But a chance to talk to Dr. LeRoy Graham, I think, can make a big difference in how you at least perceive your disease. Talk to us a little bit about some of the newer medicine.
We got another. Hold on, Dr. Lenore. We got another question from Renee, and she would like to know if you can develop asthma later in life, and how. And I'm gonna add something to that, if I could, Renee. Is that COPD, or is that related to COPD, or what's the relationship between asthma early in life and COPD later in life?
Okay, so first off, you can be diagnosed for the first time with asthma at any point in your life. Typically, we see it come in children initially. Many of the older, and when I started working in a charity clinic, I found many adults had not been diagnosed with asthma, had been treated as chronic bronchitis, but they never smoked. So sometimes the diagnosis is missed. In my opinion, and it's more opinion than science, most times with a good history, I can find in most patients there were early pre-diagnostic signs of the asthma. So I think that's important. But we also know that some people living in certain environments, may develop asthma later in life. Some people genetically are wired to do that. But it's very interesting. And when I started taking care of adults in the clinic, how many times I diagnosed patients with asthma who gave me a set of symptoms that I think, if appropriately looked at earlier in life, was asthma all along. And then the next question she asked was about COPD. Well, COPD is you can't untangle that from being exposed to cigarette smoke. And I grew up with parents that smoked, even, let me admit it, smoked a little bit myself, okay? I don't have COPD. I do still have a little bit of mild asthma. So, it's important to realize that sometimes diagnoses are delayed and the symptoms are overlooked. So that's why I try and empower my patients, especially when I talk, is you have to know the basics about the disease. We can't be totally passive in that physician-doctor relationship. We have to bring something to the game. And very importantly, if you're being treated for one diagnosis or one condition and you're not improving, we have to have that informed consumerism, respectfully challenging your physician, saying, I'm doing everything you say and I'm not getting better.
Well, what are three things that every patient should know about asthma if they're going in? What are three things that they should be armed with when they go to talk to their doctor if they feel like there's some breathing issues?
Okay. One, the expectation that your condition can be controlled. Like Star Trek, we got the technology. We have the medications to do this. So that should be an assumption when they go to the doctor, and not being radical, but expecting that. We should also know that asthma often has external triggers. So our environment is going to be very, very important. This is where we get into the dual relationship with the doctor and the patient, because I can't go into your house and control your environment. I can test or discuss with things that you need to remediate in that environment. And then finally, like I said, is the whole thing of being in an active relationship with your doctor, where there is an expectation that this doctor can make you well. And that if you're not, and then finally, there's always another one. The other thing is we have to be responsible. You have to be adherent or take your medication. You have to clean up your environment if indeed it is provocative. And my colleague, Dr. Lenore, will tell me that probably allergy testing is underutilized, particularly when we get into asthma that's problematic with a considerable burden of drug therapy. We overlook that, particularly pulmonologists and generalists. We don't think about allergies. And quite frankly, there could be something in the environment that is provocative that can be mitigated, can be reduced. And smart guys like Dr. Lenore are all over that.
You seem to give me a lot of credit, but not a lot of time.
Credit, man. I'm African, man. We got to respect the elders, man.
Why don't we continue with some of the other questions? What about, do we have another question?
We do. This is from Brandon Knight, and he's saying, hey, doctor, my lung collapsed recently. I have asthma, and it seems pretty mild. By any chance, could this have happened due to a heavy intake of marijuana smoke?
Yes. Okay. Now, first off, let's be honest. I'm glad we brought this up, because this is often the elephant in the room. I don't smoke, doc, and I do a little weed. Well, no, you smoke, okay? If you light it, one end of it's burned, the other's in your mouth, you smoke. But here's the deal. You can get a lung collapse, okay, from a bad asthma attack. And usually what it is mucus is plugged in, part of your lung collapses. But in terms of marijuana smoke, what we found is that there is some evidence that there are cannabinoids that actually relax the airway. However, not if you have to burn them or combust them to get in your lungs. Now, I'm an older guy now, I know about medical marijuana and all that stuff. So I'm not going to throw marijuana up under the bus, but marijuana is absolutely not, despite what the reggae guys tell us, it's not a treatment for asthma. It has a very irritating thing because we usually combust it, okay? And it's a wild weed, and it can be a very big irritant. So I would suggest to this young lady, I've got nothing, believe me, I got nothing against marijuana, but I would argue that if you have a respiratory disease, what I told my patients, if one end of something is burning, combusting, the other one cannot be in your mouth and breathing. It's as simple as that. Okay. So I would have to say that the first thing I would do if I knew that she was smoking is I'd say, not against the ganja, not against the marijuana, but you can't smoke it. You absolutely can't.
Okay, so follow up on that real quick. Sorry, Dr. Lenore. Follow up on that real quick. Is could they get the same effect if they used an edible form of THC. If they're trying to get some sort of effect from using marijuana, could they get that effect by using an edible? Therefore, they don't have to smoke or inhale smoke into their lungs to get the effect.
I want to be careful how I answer this. Okay.
Okay. All right.
There is a beneficial effect of it, but I would argue that first and foremost, switch to the edible so it's no longer a provocative agent in your lungs. Okay. And then let's look and see if it has any benefit. Because if you're smoking it, whatever possible benefit, and there is some benefit, there are studies about cannabinoids in terms of bronchodilation. But if it is burning, that's lost. So I would suggest if she wants to explore the value of marijuana in her therapy, and there is some evidence, I would go an edible route, a non-combustive route.
Could you say a few words about the puffer, the albuterol? So many of my patients and so many of the patients through the years think albuterol is the ideal treatment for asthma. Talk to us a little bit about albuterol, its usage and its overusage.
Albuterol is a rescue medication. Albuterol is a bronchodilator. It opens up your air passages when you're having symptoms. The underlying reason that those airways are so sensitive and go into spasm is inflammation. So if you have to use albuterol more than once or twice a week, you need to be on a maintenance anti-inflammatory medication. Okay, and that is something that it's really hard. People say, well, I don't want to be on that steroid. It's an inhaled steroid. It's a microdose. It doesn't cause steroid toxicity and things like that. So too many people, I think, shy away from therapy. But the thing is, if you are having wheezing episodes more than twice a week, if you're having symptoms more than twice a week, whatever therapy that you're on, if you are taking it properly, is by definition inadequate. So if she has an albuterol inhaler and she's having to use it 3-4 times a week, she needs to be on something else, preferably a maintenance drug that decreases the underlying inflammation of the airway, which is the essence of what asthma is.
Is it true, and I know it is true, is that people who use albuterol as their only maintenance medicine, they're in the emergency room more, they're hospitalized more, and they die more often. And so consequently, those of you who are just using albuterol, I'm telling you, it's time bound. It certainly can get you out of trouble for a while, but if you're using it as your maintenance medicine, or every time you exercise, you're wheezing, thinking you have some form of exercise-induced asthma, and you're using albuterol, those are the situations that I think you have to avoid. I would say this, that the children that I've lost, or the adults that I've lost, were those adults with mild asthma who were using albuterol as their only source of treatment, got in trouble and did not have the albuterol with them, and ultimately succumbed to the disease when they really had only a mild problem. So albuterol is nothing to take lightly. You're using it, as Dr. Graham says, twice a week. You need to be doing something else.
And it's very interesting, you know, what will happen, the class of drugs, a beta agonist that albuterol is, you will develop something called tachyphylaxis. Your response with repetitive use may be downregulated. Okay, so people relying on albuterol, it's like old joke. I took my albuterol, it always worked until it didn't. Okay, so if you're taking albuterol, like Mike said, more than twice a week, you by definition need to be on a maintenance anti-inflammatory medication. All right, and I've had patients I've seen in the clinic. We were doing a charity clinic. Hey, doc, my asthma's okay, man. I just need extra inhalers because, you know, I need that sucker 4 or 5 times a day. Well, then your asthma's not controlled. And what will happen is you get more and more inflammation. The albuterol will actually become decreasingly effective. A tragic case that we had in Georgia once, I had to review some death cases for the state. And it was a child that was found in a back bedroom, dead, with an albuterol canister that had been new the day before that was almost empty. That's, I don't know any other way I can clarify that.
All right, do we have another question? Is there another question in the chat room?
Yeah, well, this one's more complicated. I can't even pronounce some of the words. So I'm gonna let y'all.
Yes. Yes. The answer is the same as salbutamol or Ventolin. Yes, both of those are what we call beta agonists. They are bronchodilators. So salbutamol, Ventolin, which is actually a proprietary name like ProAir or something like those are all bronchodilators. And in Europe, there's much more use of salbutamol. So that's important. And sometimes we as doctors, this is where we're very deficient. We don't tell people, we don't go through the names because they're going to go talk to Pookie and the friends. They're going to tell them all kinds of medicine. We got to have them smart when they have that discussion.
And I think that's why there's an from a layman's point of view, I think that's why there's an over-reliance tendency on albuterol, because that's the one that we know. And so it works in the short term. And so we said, okay, I don't understand that. So if you would, with a little bit of the time that we have left, kind of break down the classes of medications so people kind of know what they do. And then that way we can, so when people are watching us now, they can kind of get an understanding. And then if they come back and listen to the podcast, they can understand, oh, these are the classes of asthma medications.
Well, and Mike, jump in anywhere you want. Bronchodilators, albuterol, Ventolin, Proventil, ProAir. Those are all albuterol or albuterol-like medications, acute bronchodilators. We get into steroids. We talk about Veclivant. We talk about Flovent. We talk about other medicines like that. We talk about combination medicines where we have a long-acting bronchodilator with an inhaled steroid. We think about Advair and things like that. Those are the combination medicines. Those are the kind of names off the top. But I really would like people to zone in on that, inhaled steroid. That can be the long-acting bronchodilator. There is what we call anticholinergic. That's something like Atrovent and things like that, or a long-acting antimuscarinic called LAMAs and so forth. And there's now even a triple where you have a long-acting antimuscarinic, a long-acting beta-agonist bronchodilator, and a steroid. And those are very effective medicines, though I think sometimes they're overused because the basic steps haven't been addressed.
And I would say once more to our audience, if you're having trouble, you're up at night, you miss school, you're missing work, then something is wrong with your program, because there's so much that can be done now for anyone who has asthma. You just have to seek out an opportunity to do that. One of the questions that always comes up is the role of stress, and of course we always talk about racism as a medical clinical factor. How do you feel about that?
Well, hopefully you can think of her name, but I grew up in Chicago. There's an eloquent study done by an African-American general pediatrician, as I recall, who looked at the Inglewood, which is a very violent district in Chicago, still is, and looked at literally across dividing lines, the prevalence and severity of asthma. So our autonomic nervous system, which is much involved in a lot of these responses, that's what tells you fight or flight. If you're in a threatened environment, you're exposed to violence, you're exposed to danger, you maybe have domestic abuse or so forth, those things are going to make you wired to be more reactive. So that is an important distinction that people need to know. And that living that kind of thing is an environmental provocative agent, so that's very, very important. Also, we know that a lot of times people that are stressed with job situations and they have trouble breathing, it's, well, I'm just having a panic attack. If you're having it all the time and you're wheezing, it's not a panic attack. It's whatever's panicking you is a trigger for your asthma. And we need to really make that very, very clear, because people will tell you it's only in your head. And I have been in the ICU with patients taking care of them who were told that it was all in their head until they were rushed to an ER, until they got in an ICU.
Yeah, and I was in a similar situation, watching little kids in the ICU with asthma. And you think about what a pity it is that they didn't take better care of themselves, that they were not engaged with someone who actually knew what to do. And I will tell those of you out there who have asthma right now, get with somebody who knows what they're doing, who has a history of managing asthma, who has a success ratio, who keeps people out of the hospital and out of the emergency, who's available. There are not that many Black specialists in our communities for pulmonary or for asthma, and they don't necessarily have to be Black specialists. Right. But get someone always when you have a chronic disease that knows what they're doing. And if you're not getting the outcome that you need, I think you ought to consider making some changes. We have come so far in asthma. My frustration after all these years is that so often in our community, we're not able to take advantage of the new understandings that we have, the new management styles that we have, not just with medicine, but with other things. And it is frustrating to me as a specialist to see that we still have the highest numbers of children and adults who have this as a problem. What say you, Dr.
I agree 100%. I think it is an abomination when we look at not just the rate of asthma, but the difference in terms of morbidity. And by morbidity, having to go to the ER, having to go to the hospital, having to get admitted to the ICU, and sadly dying from asthma. I would posit that 99% of asthma deaths are preventable with good patient education and the right therapy. One of the I can't let this go. I got to say this.
Say it again.
Racism. The fact that we are the largest so-called democracy in the world without a national health care plan. People should have access to the medicines they need. And what's really idiotic about this is it would actually decrease the aggregate costs of healthcare in our country if people could have access to the medications they need. I'm not running for anything, but I'm really tired of looking at this over the last 67 years of my life. We need to have equal access. I'll give you a quote. Martin Luther King was my hero. He had one of the greatest quotes. He said, "Of all the injustices, injustice in healthcare is perhaps the most shocking and inhumane, and it still persists in this country."
Well, this has been a great discussion. Obviously, we could talk about asthma almost all day. But once again, Mr. Dean asks you for three things that people should take away from our conversation here today.
You're asking me or Mr. Dean?
I'm asking you to answer what Mr. Dean asked you.
Oh, okay. Three things.
Three things.
You are having coughing or trouble breathing with any regularity, episodically, or at least 2 times a week, you need to see a doctor because you may have asthma. 2, if you have asthma and you are taking albuterol and you're using that more than 2 or 3 times a week, you need to be on something else. And 3, if you have a physician, if you're in a relationship with a physician and all the steps are being taken that they can do and you are not getting better, you have to respectfully ask to see a specialist. Those would be the 3 things that I would think of.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time, LeRoy, Dr. Graham. It's important that people understand that they can do better. If you knew better, you do better, is what Dr. Watson always tells us.
Right.
And I think that this is true for asthma. And I hope that we've been able to shake a few, trees and get people interested in taking and moving other steps. So thank you for that. And Mr. Dean and I want to talk to you about an information source that all asthmatics should have. So thank you. And you're welcome to stay.
I'd like to.
But part of the problem with asthma is that we don't often have the resources that we need in order to understand the disease, understand its management, understand its treatment, and understand its disproportionality in the African American community. And that's where we always turn to the Asthma and Allergy Network. The Asthma and Allergy Network is an organization which thrives on providing the latest information on all things allergy, especially and all things asthma. So that if you're interested not only in what the disease is about, if you're interested in what the latest approach to the diagnostics are, if you're interested in knowing what you should be doing at a particular phase of your asthma, the Asthma and Allergy Network is the place to go. I don't think you're going to find a place with more robust resources. And hopefully we in the African American Wellness Project will get there someday, but we're not there yet.
I couldn't echo that more. I have a relationship with that network with some grants, and it is led by Tanya Winders, and she is a stalwart patient advocate. And she believes, as Dr. Lenore says, that everyone should know as much as they can about their asthma and expect, if not demand, in a relationship with a physician to have that asthma control. But the Allergy and Asthma Network, www.aanma.org, is a superb resource. And it is run by someone who appreciates the value of diversity and the fact that we are not all the same.
Yeah, and I think that really once you need to, one of the things that we always feel here at the African American Wellness Project is that you should have as much information as you can about your own condition. Nobody should be able to out-talk you if you've got asthma or chronic renal problems or hypertension, a whole variety of other issues. And so I think that having the Asthma and Allergy Network for those of us who are allergists and for those of you who have asthma is a tremendous resource. One final piece, Don.
Can I speak on behalf of the lay person? I think.
Well, yeah, I guess that is your role.
Thank you for that. But I think ultimately, especially when we're talking about any illness, there's two assumptions that where there's one that's happening. I think fear, even though people may not admit it, but people are afraid to go to the doctor because there is always a potential, especially if you're not feeling well, there's a potential for bad news. And we don't like to get bad news. Now, avoiding going to the doctor is going to make that bad news worse, but we just kick the ball down the field. We just keep kicking the can down the field. So that's the one thing that we have a tendency to do that we have to stop doing. And that's why we have these type of programs so people can get the information, get empowered, and they feel more empowered to go in and have those tough conversations if there is a tough conversation. The second thing is I think people assume that every doctor is an expert. And so when they talk to a doctor, they say what the doctor said. And there's this kind of general expert quality that gets attached to every doctor. Every doctor isn't the same. That's why we have Dr. Graham on here. He's and so every doctor isn't the same. And so you've got to not only feel empowered to be your own best health advocate by getting information, but you also have to feel empowered to say, you know what? I'm not getting what I need from this doctor. I may need to go to another one and feel okay with that and not feel like you are disrespecting that particular doctor.
Absolutely. And let me add this. Doctors, we become patients too. So I know a lot about asthma, but when I got out of the military about 25 years ago, I had an aortic aneurysm, a leaking aortic valve. So I have an artificial aortic valve, and I have to take a blood thinner. And I know I'm giving you too much details, but I want to echo what he said. When I relocated to Florida, number one was I wanted to find the man to take care of hearts. Okay. I wanted the best. And I sought that. And I always give the example. We as a people, we Black people are consumers. Okay. We will read everything. We will go to 10 different stores to buy a piece of audio equipment. But yet we won't use that same scrutiny, that same, stick to itness, ferreting out the best deal when we look at a doctor. Right. So basically, you understand that doctors, we have an expertise, but we run the same gamut of from good to bad to horrible to great. So do your homework, talk to people, find out who in your area is a reliable specialist, okay, and realize that you have the right to be cared for well. You have the right to have your asthma controlled.
All right, well, on that, I'd like to thank
shop for your doctor like you shop for your shoes.
Talking from experience, it helps when doctors become patients, they become better doctors. That's all I have to say.
All right, well, I'd like to thank Dr. Graham for joining us today. And for those of you who want more information, I want your family and friends to have more information about asthma. Listen to our podcast at blackdoctorsspeak.org on every podcast channel. Black Doctors Speak. And remember, the Asthma and Allergy Network is a tremendous resource for those of you who have asthma or have children with asthma. I think that something that you should investigate. So thank you, Dr. Graham.
All right. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Dean, it was good to get an opportunity at the East Coast group of people. We want to be here every week at 7:30 on the East Coast, 4:30 on the West Coast. Each week, we'll try to bring you one of the world's experts who just happen to be Black. And we're going to ask you to call, and we're going to give the opportunity for you to call and talk to these people. It might change something. It might save you a co-payment. Who knows? So join us each week here on.
Can I just say one last thing?
Sure, of course.
Jennifer Young, she's here with us every week. She was there with us at 9 o'clock when we were on at 9 o'clock, and she is with us here when we're on at 7:30. So I don't know if you know her or not, but Jennifer, please contact us. You're going to get our special prize for today because you are a super fan. You have been with us in the beginning, and I always recognize when you pop up in our chat, in our comment section. Thank you so much for being a loyal follower and watcher of this program. So you'll get a special prize. Just reach out to us, and we'll make sure that you get today's gift.
Can I ask you a question, though? We need to get her address. Like last week, we gave away a gift, but we had nowhere to send it. So if you would just give us a place to send the special gift that we have, a book called Focus on Your Best Health, a way for you to build your own health system, then we will get that book right out to you. I think next week we'll be talking about a new men's health initiative that we want to get started with, and we'll be talking with some of the leadership of the nation's largest African American physician group, the National Medical Association. So remember, health is your biggest asset. I'm Dr. Mike Lenore. We'll talk again next week.